Good evening. I'd like to call to order the City Council meeting of Monday, September 21st, 2020. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Albertson?
Here.
Bueller?
Here.
Hoyer? Pauline?
Here.
Lallam?
Here.
Manti?
Here.
Rademski?
Here.
Roby?
Here.
Billhauer?
Here.
Y? Y?
He said he had to step out and he might be back.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. First item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda, and I'm going to move item K from the consent agenda right to the top of the regular agenda.
Moved.
Have a motion by Vilhauer and a second, or by Bueller. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye, and we'll have to do roll call vote because we don't have quorum here. Roll call vote, please, Kristen.
Okay. We're going to switch up the order. Y is not here. Billhauer?
Aye.
Roby?
Aye.
Rademski?
Aye.
Manti?
Aye.
Lallam?
Aye.
Pauline?
Aye.
Bueller?
Aye.
Albertson?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. All right, item 5 is the public comment period, and this is the time set aside for anyone that wants to speak about something to come forward and do so. And I would ask that if they want to speak about something that's on the agenda, to wait, but you don't have to do that. Would anyone like to speak? If you're online, please just say permission to speak. Sure. You put the mic on.
My name is Amy Rambo, and I am the president of Watertown Love. I'm a very passionate member of this community. I welcome discussion that leads to understanding. Before the council meeting last month, I sent each member an email with my contact information. I ask that you use this contact information. I am open and ready for some conversation on how we can make Watertown flourish with the amazing diversity it holds. Please look at this not that we want to work against council members, but that we want to work together. I'm looking for action on the council's part. I'm tired of hearing buzzwords and getting lip service from things like reactive and unintended consequences. Let's start to show the beauty of our diverse community. Let's show love and compassion for all. I hear a lot about unintended consequences. I kind of had to laugh because when I was at the meeting in August and you guys were talking about the new way that you were approving land, there were lots of unintended consequences to approving zones. Did you know that that was going to be an unintended consequence? You cannot see every situation with every ordinance. There's always going to be unintended consequences. Consequences can also be positive. Every ordinance, every vote, every discussion can have unintended consequences. Getting up and leaving my house for the day can have unintended consequences. Driving my vehicle can have unintended consequences. It's not humanly possible to know all consequences of any sort of ordinance or action. Some city council members have spoke how they want to do something. Then let's please do something. Form a human rights committee for the rights of all citizens. Take a stand and let's protect our coworkers, our friends, our family, our children, and our neighbors. Make sure that the city is looking out for each and every citizen. Please note that the Human Rights Commission that would be formed by Mayor Karen is not the same as a national human rights campaign. I know that there seemed to be some confusion in August when I was at the meeting then. No citizen should have to fight so hard for equal representation and rights. No one wants a bigger piece of pie. They just want an equal slice. The commission would be no different than the city having the Mayor's Committee for People with Disabilities. I actually looked up the responsibilities of the committee, and I found it quite interesting. The Mayor's Committee for People with Disabilities was established in Watertown in 2013. The committee was created for the purpose of developing favorable public climate to foster acceptance and meaningful integration of people with physical and mental disabilities within the community. Members include those with disabilities, parents, and those who have an interest in our challenges faced by people with disabilities. So let's take that and change it a little bit, shall we? The Mayor's Committee for Human Rights was created for the purpose of developing a favorable public climate that will foster acceptance and equal rights for people from all walks of life within the community. Members include people from all religious backgrounds, abilities, the LGBTQ community, economic backgrounds, cultures, and those that have interests in challenges faced by people within marginalized communities within the city of Watertown. Obviously, this could be added to and tweaked a little. I just wanted to give you some reference. Although my personal focus is LGBTQ rights, I am also advocating for those of the single mother raising children on her own, my black neighbor, the interracial couple down the street, my disabled sister that lives in a group home, the older couple next door, the single father doing his best to raise 3 kids on his own. As you see, this is much more far-reaching than one single group. Something that also stuck with me since the city council meeting on August 17th, which I apologize, I missed the last one because I wasn't sure on the date, was the council said they are one that reacts and is not proactive. I show you underserved populations in Watertown. React. I show you parts of the population that feel that they have no say in their local government. React. I show you parents of the community that I show you parts of the community that feel as though they're not thoroughly represented. React. I show you a sweet young gal whose body is 6 feet under in Mount Hope Cemetery because she took her life instead of living with the pain of feeling rejected by her peers and her community. I implore you to react. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to working together. Let's make Watertown even more amazing community to live and thrive in. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to come forward? Seeing no one, we will move on to approval of the agenda. And I have added that item K to the top of the agenda. Is there a motion?
Moved.
A motion by Bueller and a second by Billhauer, I think. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye, and those opposed signify by saying nay. Roll call vote, please, Kristen.
Billhauer,
Aye.
Roby,
Aye.
Redempsey,
Aye.
Manty,
Aye.
Lallam,
Aye.
Colleen,
Aye.
Bueller,
Aye.
Albertson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you for mixing it up. I bet everybody appreciates that. All right, item K from the consent agenda is authorization to accept a bid for purchase of 2021 Police Interceptor Utility All-Wheel Drive Base. I'm going to bring it out. And this is 3 police utility vehicles in the amount of $35,373 each for a total purchase of $106,119.
So moved.
I have a motion by Vilhauer
Second.
and a second by Lallam. And Chief McPeak would you please tell us about this one?
Sure. I don't have my video on because I didn't think I was going to be addressing this, but I'm sure you recognize my voice. We went out for bids for patrol cars, and we received the one bid from Watertown Ford Chrysler for the price you see there, $35,373. We did check the state bid that the state has online, and they have a bid through Lamb Motors for roughly that same price, but it doesn't include a couple of the options that we put in our vehicles. So the actual state bid is just a little higher than Watertown Ford Chrysler, so we recommend going with Watertown Ford Chrysler bid.
All right, thank you. Any questions, council? Councilman Lallam?
Kristen, is this in the budget for this year?
Yes, it is.
Chief, when would we take possession of these?
Actually, just to clarify something, this is for 2021. These are CIP items that were approved in the CIP. So we will be ordering them soon because we have to get in the build assembly line for these vehicles. And we expect to receive them sometime in February, March frame is when we'll get them. But if we wait till January in order, we could get them at the end of next year. So that's why we want to get in a little sooner this year and get them the approval and get them ordered, but they will be next year's CIP budget items.
Well, that was my next question. Any other issues with that as far as their build? I know the factories and stuff have had some issues with just, frankly, producing vehicles. Are we December or February? Is that a pretty straightforward number on there?
We were told if we could have our order in by October 1st, we would be the first batch and should get them in February. We just now received our last car from this year that we ordered right before the first of the year. We just got it in-house last week, and we just got it outfitted, and it should be on the streets yet this week. So that's why we wanted to get ahead of the rest of the queue, and hopefully that COVID doesn't shut a factory down again or something like that. So yeah, we're needing these vehicles, and we're hoping that we can get them early part of next year.
Would that payment go out this year or after we take delivery?
After we take delivery next year. Yep.
Okay.
And they know that this is a next year's budget, so we can't pay a dime until 2021 budget turns over.
Okay, thank you.
All right,
bet.
thank you. Councilman Roby?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question, Chief. It says Interceptor Utility all-wheel drive base. What model is it? What vehicle actually is it?
It's the Ford Explorers like we currently have.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilman Vilhauer?
Chief McPeak, this is Glenn. I just want to apologize and thank you. I was one that suggested pulling this off the consent agenda just because the dollar amount, especially in total for the three. You've answered, I question only one bid. You've answered that. And I also was going to ask about state pool options, and you've answered that. So I want to thank you, but you've answered my questions.
Thanks, Glenn. Appreciate it.
Very good. Councilman Albertson?
Thanks, Mayor. Chief, just question, you didn't trade anything in? Are you still maintaining the deal that you keep the old ones?
Correct. The old ones become either our travel car or a command staff car, or sometimes we ask other departments if they have a need and they take the vehicle. So we haven't traded these vehicles in the past, and we don't plan on trading any in next year.
All right. Anyone else? Councilman Lallam, did you have another comment?
No, been a while since I've been on video, sorry.
Okay. All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Roll call vote, please. Kristen?
Vilhauer,
Aye.
Roby,
Aye.
Rademski,
Aye.
Manti,
Aye.
Lallam,
All right,
Pauline,
Aye.
Bueller,
Aye.
Albertson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you. Item A is annexation and zoning for a portion of property south of Highway 212 and east of 23rd Street Southeast, known as the Endries Third Edition. One is approval of resolution number 20-37, initiating annexation of a tract of land contiguous to the city of Watertown, South Dakota, And 2 will be the second reading of the ordinance establishing the zoning designation of C3 Highway Commercial District. And we'll start with the annexation. I have a motion by Holleen and a second by Bueller. And Heath, will you please tell us about this?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Mayor. Bob Indries is the owner and has petitioned to annex and zone this property that's generally located south of Highway 212, east of 23rd Street Southeast. This property is approximately 8.35 acres. Upon annexation, it is being proposed to be zoned a C3 Highway Commercial District. The petitioner has also submitted a preliminary plan and a plat that will be subsequently brought forth to the Planning Commission and the City Council following the annexation and zoning if it were approved. The comprehensive land use plan does not include this area, but the proposed C3 Highway Commercial District is consistent with the land that's adjacent to this property as far as the zoning is concerned. The area that is proposed to be annexed and zoned includes the extension of 10th Avenue Southeast from 26th Street to 23rd Street. And the Planning Commission recommended approval for both these actions, the annexation and the zoning, at their August 20th meeting unanimously by a vote of 7-0. I do have a map I'll pull up here for reference. I also have the urban planner, Brandy Hanton, online, as well as the community development manager, Stacy Bungard, online with us here too to help answer any questions we might have.
All right, thank you. You said that's not in our comprehensive plan?
Yeah, that's correct. This particular area, for whatever reason, was not identified and called out as far as potential future land development zoning is concerned. And
That's
Brandy, if
surprising.
you want to verify that with me, that's how the summary is written. That's correct, right, Brandy?
That is correct. And then, but as far as how, if it's appropriate for the adjacent land uses, there is C3 to the north as well, and then to the south, and then to the west and east. So it's surrounded with C3 Highway Commercial, which is what they're proposing. But then you'll see there on the south, around the boundaries of it, there is industrial, the I-1 light industrial zoning as well. And then just to clarify too, this preliminary plan for the area was approved by the Planning Commission at the September 10th meeting unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, councilmen and women?
All the red on the map I have pulled up here, Mayor, would be C3 zoning. There's a small portion of C2 zoning here that's more in the pink shaded area, but all this red is C3 zoning. And you'll see the hatched area is proposed to be annexed and zoned, a portion of that, of course, being 10th Avenue, as discussed.
All right, thank you. No questions? All right, we'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Roll call vote, please, Kristen.
Vilhar,
Aye.
Roby,
Aye.
Rademski,
Aye.
Manti,
Aye.
Lalum,
Aye.
Holleen,
Aye.
Bueller,
Aye.
Albertson.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, item 2 is the second reading of ordinance number 20-35, establishing the zoning designation of C3 Highway Commercial District. And I will go ahead and open the public hearing. Is there anyone here that would like to speak about this issue? If so, please come forward, or say if you're online, permission to speak. Not seeing or hearing. Oh, excuse me.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Greg Blow, and I am Vice Chairman of the Lake Compesca Water Improvement District. We met 10 days ago to discuss what had come before the council 2 weeks ago. And actually, some of us were unaware of this, but we unanimously resolved to take a position, and I believe our chairman, Paul Hinterrocker, sent the mayor a letter and copied all the council members.
Greg,
So-
if I might interrupt you, we are on a different item. We're not on the rezone for the lake property yet. That's coming next.
Missed it. Thank you, Mayor.
So we'll just continue after that. Right now, we're looking at the Endries property, Endries third edition rezoning. And is there anyone that would like to speak about that? Please come forward. And see no one, I'm going to close the public hearing for that item, and I need a motion for action. I have a motion by Holene and a second by Vilhauer. And Heath, is there anything that needs to be added to what you already said?
No, this is just the second reading of the zoning. Of course, the annexation and zoning go hand in hand, and the zoning takes 2 readings. So this is the second and final reading for that action to be zoning this newly annexed property to a C3 highway commercial.
All right, thank you. Any questions, council, or comments? All right, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Roll call vote, please, Kristen?
Billhauer,
Aye.
Roby,
Aye.
Redempsey,
Aye.
Manti,
Aye.
Lallam,
Aye.
Helene,
Aye.
Bueller,
Aye.
Albertson.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So item B on the regular agenda is the second reading of ordinance number 20-33, amending the zoning map of the city of Watertown, South Dakota for a portion of Country Club Estates Edition from R1 Single Family Residential District and PUD Planned Unit Development to CL Lake Commercial District and R1 Single Family Residential District. So look for a motion first, and then I'll open the public hearing. Have a motion by Bueller. And a second by Rademski. And actually, I would like Public Works Director, City Engineer Heath Von Eye to give us an introduction before I do the public hearing.
Absolutely, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Vince Foley and Charlie Mack, acting agent for Prairie Winds Golf LLC, have petitioned to rezone this legally described property within the city of Watertown. Its current zoning designations include an R1 single-family residential district along with a PUD, Planned Unit Development District. The rezone is proposed to be a CL Lake Commercial District and then a remnant R1 single-family residential district within this property. It's approximately 7.42 acres are being considered here for rezoning. And the comprehensive land use plan does not reflect the current designation of a PUD that is currently existing. It does show as future residential development. This property is currently undeveloped, and Prairie Winds Golf LLC is planning on developing the property upon rezoning. I'll note that the CL Lake Commercial District was developed strategically to allow for mixed-use development, infill, adjacent to residentially zoned properties near Lake Compesca and Lake Pelican. That's why the applicant has chosen to exercise that potential zoning district for this area. There are certain limitations with that CL district that are outlined in the zoning ordinance. It was recently adopted relating to the exterior walls facing any R1 districts and how they're required to be finished with certain specific materials. There's also other restrictions and regulations regarding the setbacks and the amount of grass or buffer area on the edges of any CL lots that are zoned CL. And other items to note, looking at my summary here. If the rezone is approved, there will be a subsequent vacation and replat of this addition. And the Planning Commission recommended approval at the August 20th meeting on a split vote of 5-2. And again, staff is online with us today, and either they or I would be glad to help answer any questions the council might have.
All right, thank you. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing, and I'll invite Greg Blow back to, this is the thing that you came to talk about.
I apologize. When there's a void, I just thought, well, I should fill it. So I won't go back over, but I think you've all been advised of our position. And I'll try to be brief and explain how we arrived at it and go on. First, we're concerned about the lowlands that surround the entire lake. Not only this piece that we're talking about tonight, but all the areas around the lake. If you recall, the city sponsored a study to create a master plan for Lake Campesca. I participated, as many did, and there were public hearings which were really well attended. And one of the higher priorities that came out of that and was incorporated in the master plan was the fishery. And the fishery biologist that led that part of the study talked about the fact that there were very few places where fish could reproduce, spawn in our lake. And his suggestion was to go to these lowlands around the lake and find ways for fish to move back and forth from the lowlands into the lake. And so the fingerlings would be able to hide in those lowlands until they grew a bit and moved into the lake. Well, if we begin a program of filling the lowlands, what we call the Jewel of Watertown, Lake Campesca, will no longer have an opportunity to really grow the fishery. Game Fish and Parks stocks that lake now, and really there's been a degradation in fishing in the lake for quite a while. And so the master plan identified those lowlands as being very important, especially if they could be developed with some access to the lake. Our concern with the lowlands and this zoning change is basically that that if we change the development plan, and we already have a development plan, if we change the development plan to make it even easier and more profitable to develop around the lake inside the 100-year flood zone, and that's the only place we're addressing. If we make that easier, then we've lost all chance of using those lowlands for anything, because they won't be lowlands anymore. If you fill in those lowlands, they will no longer be a part of flood control. And now they are. In fact, the piece that we're discussing tonight, I believe in the 97 event, had so much water in it that once the lake went down, the water in there had to be pumped back into the lake. It had grown so big. So it's pretty clear that they serve that function. Also, the biologists will tell you that those lowlands filter out contaminants that are in the water. And it's especially important to our lake. Our group is really concerned about the contaminants in the water and trying to get the water cleaned up. And if we can trap those and filter them down through the soil and out through the plants that grow there, we have a much better chance of controlling the problems in our lake. So, in conclusion, really, we are opposed to this, to the filling of this particular zone area and all of the lake. And we would oppose it, and we would ask that the city would advise us when applications have been made to fill any of the lowlands inside the 100-year flood. We're not concerned, and our point is not to deal with outside that zone. But, for example, today I noticed, as I drove by the country club, that I believe the land to the east is already being scraped, and there are big piles of fill there. That's not what we're talking about today, I don't think. But has there been a permit authorized for that, Mayor, do you know? And
I asked about that, and no, there's no permit issued yet. There's an application in, and the staff is still trying to work through it, but as of today, no permits have been issued for the grading.
And see, those are some of the mechanics we think really need to come forward here if we're going to be able to protect our lake. And, you know, that's why we spent $65,000 for that master plan or whatever it was, and all the people that participated in it. So that's our position, and we only come here because we're concerned about the lake, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Can we ask questions now in the public hearing or wait until after the public hearing? 'Cause I've got a question for Mr. Blow.
He's here, I say go ahead and ask the question.
Well, this probably isn't a fair question, Greg, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How does this differ? You know, we looked at a couple different parcels on the north side of the lake within the last year that we approved the zoning designation or the zoning change of that. I don't recall the opposition coming forth at that time from your organization. Is there a distinction between that and this area?
Two things. One, I don't know when we became aware of that, but secondly, I don't know if they're in the 100-year plan, so I can't help you too
Like
much.
I say, it wasn't a fair question, but that thought did cross my mind. What's the distinction between this area and what we acted
I
on
understand.
prior on the north side?
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak about this?
Hello, my name is Vince Foley, and to my right is Charlie Mack. We are the proponents and petitioners of this project. And we want to speak here on behalf of those items that support the concept of this rezoning. One of the things I think that is important to us is that we submitted this through the Planning Commission, and they had an affirmative vote. We presented it, and those people serve this community in a thankless task most times, and we should all be appreciative of what they do and what they have to listen to. And so towards that end, I think it's important that we keep in mind that affirmative vote occurred. Second, I do want to also address the point of why the city, the CL zoning makes sense in this particular situation. The purpose. Governing documents are always a changing process, and you made the determination as the council that the CL district made sense for what we as a community wanted to accomplish for the lake and the community. This particular stretch, if you look from a higher elevation than just simply looking at the map, it's a main section line that goes all the way through to Lake Pelican. A main thoroughfare that serves not only Compesca, but could serve people that might want to be down in the Pelican area. Number one. Number two, that stretch of property of South Lake Drive is congested. I mean, that was back in the days of the Williams Resort, the Stony Point Resort, and the platting came after the building, and the situation is such that there are a lot of people along that stretch that that need something, and I think it'd behoove the community to have that something to allow them to be off-site. A second point along those lines as it relates to the particular issues that Mr. Blow addressed and the concern about the fisheries. I'm an outdoorsman. I wish Kempesca had more fish than it does. But this isn't this parcel isn't that solution. All you have to do is look across South Lake Drive, and there's no place to put any sort of piping to turn this into a fisheries pond. Now, I haven't been approached by anybody for that to be a fisheries pond. So it's one thing to say this is a nice idea that we should do a fisheries pond to a stocking pond. That is important to look at the practicalities, I think, of the site to think about whether or not that's viable. But also, having lived painfully through the issue of the 1997 flood and everything that followed with the Mahoney Creek Dam process, I think it's important that when we talk about flood control, we actually think about what we're talking about in this particular portion of the 100-year floodplain. This portion is that excess in a big flood event that would absorb that flow, and then the balance of the flows goes down the river until the hydraulic pressures equalize. Then it balloons back out or pushes back out in an ameliorated amount of water. And so we're not talking about an impingement upon the floodway. We're not talking about an impingement on the floodplain next to the floodway. We're talking about an impingement for storage of some water, albeit not very much. Pete, could you go overhead? Can you zoom down a little bit? It's a little. Okay. If you take and think about the project area, you've seen the map, we're talking about a total area of fill, of area square foot of those figures. And if you convert, oops, I better watch where I put it.
Vince, this one, Pete, can that be shared to Teams or no? That overhead video, okay. Sorry, Teams, I tried. A lot of the council members are on Teams. I was just curious if that can be shared.
For those on Teams, you don't know what you're missing. And so the total volume, if you filled everything, and what I'm talking about is when I talk about the fill also, what we're using as a standard is just simply 4.5 feet straight up and down. No slopes, nothing. Mayor, I'll give you a copy when I'm done.
I'm going to text it to the council members.
Oh, okay.
So they can see it right now.
Thank you. Okay, so then if you think about what, and let me back up for a moment. We're talking about a zoning project, but let's understand that we've been upfront with what we were considering. It all needs to be approved through the plating process. It still might run afoul of the plating process, but this rezoning, we wanted to be upfront with what we were thinking about so that it wasn't a matter of hide the ball. And so we fit this into the CL district, and so what we're appearing today is on that rezoning. But I'm responding to the issue of the flood amounts. And so if you take and consider that area of the green space, or that area of the lot, that funny shaped lot, that would be part of the 50% that is not turned into detention pond, and then you subtract the actual volume that the pond would take for storage, you end up with that 788,000 cubic feet figure. Did you get it?
Yeah.
If one takes and thinks about what the area north, if you're familiar with the area, there's on the north side of the tee box, there's angular or a rectangular, skinny rectangular pond. That was a borrow area that was used to build the tee box. So if you just think about that area north of that borrow area, that amount of fill is that 659,000. And so even if we were to think about the concept of the storage volume, the 128,000 cubic feet is the maximum add. So you need to keep in mind what that means when we talk about the impact on the floodwaters. Because remember, this is storage. This isn't part of the actual floodway. So if we have an amount of storage that we would be losing when you compare we could develop it now versus what we're proposing in the worst case scenario, that 128,000 cubic feet is the volume increase. Well, in 1997, in the gauge north of town, the peak flows were 7,820 cubic feet. It sure seemed like it was a lot more. But that was the flows that came through at a peak on April 6th. For that 128,000 cubic feet to pass through a single point in that peak flood would amount to 16 and a half seconds of that flood flow.
I think you got that on Teams, didn't you, Pete?
Yeah, I'm sharing my screen now, so.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
So if you think then about what impact that has on the flood, a storage unit like the area that we're talking about absorbs water, waits to hydraulic pressure, equalizes, then puts water out. So even in a flood event, it wouldn't quite be adding to the top of the flows. But just for the sake of argument, let's talk about adding it to the top of the flow. Let's say that we're going to take that 128,000 and add it to the flows. If we spread it out over a 3-day event, the fraction of the total flow contributed by that storage is that very small percentage figure. If you then take and compute that amount, and the volume added to the peak flows is that half a cubic foot. That half a cubic foot spread out over the flood coming from this balloon reservoir adds 3.5 gallons per second. Now, anybody that was around in 97 knows that 3.5 gallons wouldn't amount to much. Keep in mind, that's not how a flood works. Normally, you don't just take storage out and put it on top. The hydraulic pressure equalizes. But we want to make sure that we remain consistent also. It stuck in my mind because I remember in 97 when we were dealing with the aftermath in the meeting upstairs, Rick Schlechter said something to the effect of, well, the peak flows this building above ground. It actually turns out to be pretty darn close if you think about the cubic feet. So this is the effect of the flood at the peak flow. And so if I had 3.5 gallons of milk lined up, that's what we'd be adding. But even today, I couldn't figure out how to make the picture from my camera work. The city has dumped 44 dump truck loads out at City Park of fill. That's 10% of that 128,000 figure. I'm here to tell you that that fill is a good thing, because that fill at City Park is a good thing, because it's going to enhance City Park and it's going to have a minimal impact on whatever flood event might happen. And that impact is just those loads, 10%. Just 10% of what we're talking about here. So the concept that we're somehow having adverse effect on the flood, any flood that might happen, is small. Number one. Number two, your zoning ordinances strongly support the idea that we need something around the lake, and we come together with an idea and a project and a cooperative effort to try to do that. The demand is there, and I'll let Charlie speak to the demand and what he's been able to accomplish.
Thanks, Vince. That was impressive. I hadn't got to see all those details laid out like that yet. I knew you had that prepared, but yeah, so Vince is taking care of the legal side, the zoning side, putting together this presentation that you saw here. I've been working on the back end, working with contractors to find out if this is economically feasible, but more importantly, talking to the adjacent landowners along South Lake Drive. As of today, the project that we are talking about has been has created a lot of excitement for those South Lake Drive landowners. So the ones that we would probably want to be the most concerned about what they thought about the project are actually the same landowners that are asking to purchase these units. I read an article about a month ago that said storage demands across the United States are increasing by 7% annually. So whatever you have for toy storage and old antique storage and cars and general storage of any kind, each year it grows by 7%. We know that there is a strong demand for storage on South Lake Drive. We think that the piece of property that Vince and I are working on, that Prairie Winds is working with Vince on, is a perfect location. It's not directly on South Lake Drive. It's about 2 to 3 blocks south on a gravel road. The design of the property, the way we have these buildings laid out, we think is going to look very nice. We've got trees planned for around the outside. We've got siding. We've got all of the high-end type of finishes that one would want to see along South Lake Drive. So we think we've done our part to present a plan to meet the desires of those South Lake Drive property landowners. And so I guess I'm here to answer any questions you might have specific to that.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak about this before we, okay, there are other people that want to speak, unless you wanted, did you have questions for?
I've got a couple of questions for these gentlemen, if I could,
Okay.
as long as they're up here. Charlie, referencing what you had said about the design and the layout of the storage units, so you're saying the adjoining or the adjacent landowners, I have been in contact with one, in fact, he spoke at the Planning Commission meeting in opposition, but in general, you're getting a pretty good feel from the homeowners or landowners out there?
Yeah, we've got somewhere around 50 units. I think if we completely build this thing out, there may be around 50 to 70 units. Obviously, we can't sell them yet until we've got approval from the South Dakota Real Estate Commission, but so we've just been assessing interest from those landowners. And I believe as of today, I've got 23 landowners along South Lake Drive. These are people who own homes between Hidden Valley and Jackson Park that have expressed interest that if this goes through, they would like to purchase one of these units. And for the purposes is get the motorhomes off South Lake Drive, get the jet skis, get the boat trailers, try to clean up that South Lake Drive area. I've had a number of landowners say they're very excited about this because what's happening right now is there's such strong demand for storage along South Lake Drive that what's happening is on the south side, people that own the lakeside property are purchasing the lot across the street, and then they're building a man shed or a building that just barely conforms to the city's requirements. So essentially it's a 3,000 square foot garage, and I think the city requires something like 300 square feet of living space, and so they've shoehorned this in, and you end up with a lot of these buildings built along, and if you look, you'll see, and possibly one of the people you're talking about that expressed some displeasure in this project may have built one of those. And so what we're trying to do is prevent the demand and reduce the demand for those big garages, and hopefully we'll see some nicer looking homes on the south side of lakes, of the South Lake Drive.
What about, again, concerns about, what the units will look like as far as screening, buffering? What are the plans or any plans you might have to those concerns?
Well, I can address that, and that's one of the particular reasons we picked the CL district is because of those new requirements, because Charlie lives on South Lake Drive. My mother has a cabin on South Lake Drive. And so the screening is important, and so it has to be a coniferous deciduous mix, and I mean that would be our intention at this point. And if something more is required, yes. A couple other things that I'd address in the way of the look and the appearances. I've made a personal commitment that there will be a physical barrier that will prevent vehicles from traveling west off the property down to the west. The particular landowner that we spoke about, I promised him that's a personal obligation. Another thing that we did, we technically didn't have to do, but we oriented the buildings on the west so that the doors pointed in, and so that it would just be the back side of the buildings that have to conform to the CL residential siding and architectural feature language, which is it has to have a nice appearance. These aren't metal sheds.
If this is approved, gentlemen, what the access will be off 54th Street then going in? Is that the plan?
Yes.
Okay, because there is access off South Lake Drive now into the area that you own. Is that not correct, Vince? Or
that's not an access. That's just a platted lot.
Okay.
And the plat we will seek is to make that strip with the three remaining lots all one lot but R1, and for whatever the future holds. And again, to that neighboring landowner, I've made a commitment that nothing is going to be built there.
So the access would be off 54th Street then into the area?
Yes.
Okay.
Nothing from South Lake Drive.
Okay. Thanks, gentlemen.
Councilman Bueller?
Thank you, Mayor. Hey, fellas, just a couple of questions for you. The screening part of this, you're looking at probably the north and the west part. Is that where you're thinking about screening?
Yes.
And then there's been some discussion, I think, about detention ponds. Is that still in the thought process to develop some detention ponds for the hydrology part of this? And then I have one other question, and that is, how much fill are you looking at? Did you say you were intending to put in there where those storage sheds would go?
Okay, let's address it one step at a time. That is the area that would be the stormwater detention. Right now, it's depicted as a pond with depth. Frankly, I wanted to have a pond that my grandkids could fish in, but that still would have to be approved by the planning and zoning under the platting, whether it's an acceptable concept. It still will have the volume, the freeboard above the high water mark, or whatever that measurement is, that we have to use as the base, still addresses all of the stormwater detention.
So, but you're, back to the fill question, is that, are you looking at 4.5 feet, did I hear you say?
That was just the figure that I used to illustrate the figure. It's going to be 4.5 probably.
Okay.
But what I was using for volume was straight sides, which of course wouldn't be the case. But I mean, that's why we use that figure, just to present a conservative figure as opposed to being overly optimistic.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Would anyone else like to speak?
Mayor, I would like to make one comment if I could.
Sure.
Just, you know, in kind of studying this and visiting with the folks in planning here, you know, I think the commercial development of this would require, I mean, you can put commercial buildings actually in the flood area. You can position them and they're actually, they're built so that if it floods, and that's just, the materials have to be correct, the power, there's a number of things that have to be considered to do that versus if it's residential. Residential would require a much greater amount of fill, I would imagine, so that it would stay above the 100-year flood level.
Hi, I'm Brad Johnson. I'm also a member of the Lake Kempeska Water Project District, and I was quite interested to see how much of an expert Vince has become as a hydrology. You know, the issue really is this. He's telling you this is just a small part of the destruction of the floodplain around Lake Kempeska. So he's asking you just to be a participant in just a little bit of the destruction. A little bit of a destruction leads to a great destruction sooner or later. That's how we've gotten partially into the problem that we have at the lake now. We've gone along and we just fill and fill and fill and fill. And then we turn around and we look at the people that live up north of Lake Kempeska, and we want to take 6,000 acres away from them to build a dam to protect what we're not willing to protect in our own backyard. And if you participate in this, and that's really what this is, it's a participation on your part, because the development as it's currently platted as a residential development probably does not make economic sense, because they'd have to build a fairly long road through there, and the cost of residential land is cheaper than commercial land. So what they're asking you to do is pretty much eliminate the need for them to build a road. So they would only have to come in from a small part of 54th Street, and they would have one very large commercial lot in an area that should be residential. But they would have one commercial lot where they would be able to have very intensive development and make a very substantial profit off of that. On a residential one, they would not be able to make that kind of a profit. So what you're doing by rezoning this is making that land more valuable. You're making it more likely that they would come in with 4.5 feet of fill. Now, this is a storage development. This is not something that, like, is, you know, a new clubhouse or something like that would be essential to a golf course. They don't even want it for the golf course. They want the profits from it. So what they want, I mean, you can take this whole development and move it a half a mile up the road on a hill that's not in a flood zone and serve the same need. But instead, because that's where the land is that they own, down low, that's where they want to develop. What the Lake Kempeska Water District did in its letter to you was encourage you not to use zoning as an incentive to fill the land around Lake Kempeska. That's what this is. You change the zoning, you create an incentive for them to fill this land. And, you know, right now, Vince can do what he wants with the existing lots. He can go in and fill it. We're not saying he can't. Likelihood is he's probably not going to. But they definitely will with the next one. we should not just little by little destroy what we have left of the floodplain around Lake Compesca. The city of Watertown has gone out, it's purchased over 130 acres around the lake and low-lying area, this particularly the land east of City Park. We purchased that land specifically to prevent it from being filled and developed. The city did. Also purchased the Third Avenue Pond. So the city also has a history of trying to protect that floodplain. And the Lake District is encouraging you in this particular instance to not provide the incentive for them to fill this flood area. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak?
Mike Lawrence. I kind of came about this working close at Stony Point and seeing the development in that area. It's a highly commercialized area. It's a place where a lot of people want to be. Some of the smallest lots and smallest houses go for the most amount of money in that area between the two golf courses. As they said, you know, there is an issue. Same issue we have with the condos. Where do we put our stuff? We're going to be moving out of a house on Lake Compesca. Where do I put my golf cart? Where do I put my my boats and things like that? Those are some of the questions that come up to me personally, and that's why I kind of am leaning towards this. As far as filling of the flood zone, one thing I found kind of interesting in this argument is if it's zoned now, you can fill it. Lake Association doesn't have any problem with that. So everyone can raise their houses up. People that are adjacent to the lake, they can fill. You know, let's see, any of the low-lying areas that are already done can fill. Anyone downstream in Watertown in the 100-year, they can fill. I mean, you know that the water goes down into Watertown. If you're going to be telling the lake people that they can't fill around on their property that they own, then you have to take that into town. Because when you're filling in town in the 100-year flood zone, that's going to back it up into Lake Compesca, into my house, which is in the flood zone. So you're picking winners and losers here. How can you tell people out by the lake that they can't do it, where in the same watershed downstream, you allow it at an even bigger rate? I mean, there's more land, obviously, in Watertown that is in the 100-year flood zone than there is in around the lake. So that's something that I find a little odd, is we can allow people to fill as long as they're already zoned, or we can allow people to fill in town where the water would go. But people touching the lake, well, not even touching the lake, most of the land around the lake's already rezoned, so they can fill. There's a couple commercial spots that would never be able to be filled if they weren't rezoned, so they would have to stay commercial, and they would never be able to go to residential and be filled. So that does protect the commercial land around the lake, which would be nice, because I think that's good. But you couldn't take those commercial spots and rezone them and then fill them and make more residential houses. So those are some of the arguments I find kind of interesting, is you're choosing to take you're picking who you're taking property rights from without any sort of compensation. You know, and when it gets into, well, they can make money at this. Right now, we're getting contacted in our development by people from Sioux Falls and Brookings and other places that don't have this type of development. They don't have people standing up and saying, I'm going to build this and I'm going to build this. You know, the Sioux Steel project is on hold. You know, you look at Bob Drake, you look at these guys, you look at all the other development that's going on in Watertown, that's money coming in. And yes, this isn't always about money, but it's also about property rights. And it's your decision to pick who you take your property rights from, but that would be something that I would say you would have to do across the board. If you're not going to allow the 100-year flood zone to be filled at the lake, then anywhere around the river it shouldn't be filled, anywhere in town it shouldn't be filled, because that's where the water goes. So that's those are my comments on it. I just think that when you get people that want to develop and there is a want from them, like you said, 23 people that are on South Lake Drive have a need for this. If it doesn't come down to, well, they're just doing it for profit. Obviously, nobody's going to get into a development like this if there's no incentive to do it. I always pat these guys on the back because they're coming up with a plan. They're taking the risk. They're putting it out there. They're making a project out here that's going to increase property values. It's going to increase the aesthetics of the lake because people are going to be able to put things away. Overall, I think it's a good project. I think that we should encourage development in our community. And if you're going to take property rights away from people at the lake, you should look at taking them away from the people in the community as well then. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Hello, Brian Brandrate. Vince touched on something that I was thinking about when I sat in my chair tonight. When we fill 3-4 feet, the difference it makes on a large project, on a large body of water, like it's so minuscule. It's just it's so tiny. I don't think it's worth bringing up. Another thing that Bruce brought up. Building a commercial property in the flood zone, you know, we're good to do that. Who in their right mind spends that kind of money to build something and plan for it to flood? That's just crazy, especially if you want something that's going to look good. We want this thing to last. The idea of the fishing, actually, I live on the west side of the lake. And off the point this spring, there was 40 to 50 boats, quite a few nights on Compesca. They weren't there for the heck of it. They caught a lot of fish. All summer long, there was 4 or 5 boats out early in the morning. So the fishing's done pretty well. This is not going to kill that by no stretch of the imagination. The Stony Point project, that's going to put a lot of people on the water. We need recreation on this lake. Everybody, I think, is pretty excited about some of these projects that are going to be taking place, and we're going to need storage. I don't know how this can be a bad thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak?
Eric Scott, and I'd just say, as another developer in town, I get a little bit concerned when we talk about using zoning designations as a way for the city to block development of certain types of things, or to, it just seems like a little bit of a manipulation and could be overused. That's concerning. It also seems appropriate that if the city's buying land or things like that to help preserve the 100-year floodplain and provide those areas, that's appropriate to use public funds for that to protect the public. I don't think it's right to block somebody's buildable right on their lot by manipulating the zoning designation, and so that's where my concerns lie in this type of zoning, or blocking the zoning based on those types of things. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Aaron Hansen. I also live at the lake on South Lake Drive. I guess really my only concern is maybe with a bad right slice I might hit one of those buildings, but I guess that's a me problem. I can probably handle that. I think back, it wasn't too long ago, you guys rezoned Dolly's land on the north side of the lake. I think this is fairly similar to that issue. And then I also think across the street from me is a similar property that something similar to this could be done, and I would fully embrace and support that as well, because storage is an issue. I just look at my own place, and we've got trailers outside where I don't always like them, or they're not convenient, but that's what's available, so that's what we do. So having storage, I think, is a big need, especially there on South Lake Drive. I did talk to one contractor that said, boy, if they would go through with these residential lots and they would develop and put houses in here, they could make a lot more money. Why don't they do that? And then I talked to some folks, and it sounds like it's not just about the money. It's about what the need is there and what's going to support that area. And that's not more houses. That's storage for the people that already live there and people that are on South Lake Drive. So I would hope that you'd encourage rezoning this for these folks. I think it'd be a great thing. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Brian Brandead again. Vince touched on another thing, and this I've said this numerous times this summer. Every time I go to City Park and I see the camping, I shake my head. I'm just like, I can't even believe one of our main campgrounds looks like this. I said numerous times, like, when the city has time, why can't we be running some trucks and just dumping dirt in there? And That's a pretty nice park. And now with the memorial there, it's a little bit of an eyesore when there's water sitting in all the camp spots. So I would hope that the city plans to continue to fill there. I would hope that regardless of what happens here, that wouldn't change what you could do there, because something really does need to be done about City Park. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to speak about this issue? See no one, I will close the public hearing and entertain conversation. Councilman Roby. I guess he didn't have anything. Other council members?
Madam Mayor, can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, I can hear you now, Don. Go ahead.
Okay, my apologies, operator error there. I'm one of the owners, or a part of the ownership group of Prairie Winds Golf Club. And because of that, I discussed this with City Attorney Matt Roby. And he said, because of that relationship, he said I should recuse myself of this situation due to a conflict of interest. So I wanted to make that on the record.
All right, thank you. Councilman Vilhauer?
I just want to clarify, Matt, our attorney is on, isn't he? I know the answer, I'm pretty sure, but I just want to clarify. When it comes to either ratifying or rejecting a planning commission recommendation, it's a simple majority, correct?
No, it's actually, if it was rejected at the plan commission, it requires 2/3 to overrule the plan commission. If it was approved at the plan commission, it's a simple majority.
But I mean, in this case, the planning commission did approve it or recommend it to us, so it's either up or down at our point in our case now with a simple majority.
In this instance, yes, it's a simple majority.
I just want to clarify that up front.
Councilman Lallam.
Thank you, Mayor. A question for you, actually. Do we have anything that's flowing from this area to the lake, as Mr. Blow had stated, for fishery?
Do we have anything flowing? You mean
Yeah,
a project?
they were talking about water flowing back and forth from flooded area to non-flooded area.
No, this is
This doesn't have
disconnected.
direct access, does it?
No, it's disconnected, but wetlands that are disconnected are not regulated by the Corps of Engineers. Doesn't mean they don't perform a function that wetlands perform, which is filtering out the water. And, so if you reduce the volume below the base flood elevation, then you're reducing the capacity to filter water. You don't have to do any calculations to understand that. There's a loss, and there has been historically a loss at Lake Kempeska from the very first construction of a railroad, and there's not much left, actually. So it's one of few remaining wet areas.
But as a residential, they could fill that in to a higher elevation than what it currently is, correct?
They could, and the city engineer, I believe, has some authority to look at areas for fill, and I'm not sure where all that goes, but in Title V, we'd have to look at that. This isn't a question of fill right now. This is a question of zoning, and so the council.
Well, I understand that. But we're talking it's residential zoning currently. I mean, they could fill that in and put houses in, correct?
They could, yes, and they'd have to build roads because every lot has to abut a public road.
I understand that. I'm just making the point that they could still fill in whether it's zoned commercial lake or if it's residential.
Right. That's right. That wouldn't be an argument. What the council should be considering, is this an appropriate place for a commercial zone at the lake, an appropriate place for the CL zone? And that's really the question at hand. And whether the fill goes in or not, the fill could go in if it's CL, the fill could go in if it's R1, the fill could go in if it's PUD. That really doesn't matter. It wouldn't be as cost effective, I think was the point of that. If you left the zoning alone, it probably won't happen, just because it won't be profitable. So by leaving it alone, you know, yes, they have a building right and they retain that building right, but there's not a lot in it because, I mean, it's been challenging to build in a place like that. So I think that was the point that was being made. Councilman Vilhar?
Oh, excuse me. Question, I know we've had, I mean, before we approved the CL Lake District designation, there were areas that were identified as being possible areas for that designation. We also had a Lake Compesca master plan done. We had a comprehensive land use plan done. Where was this, how did this area shake out in those particular studies?
I think our urban planner probably can answer that. Brandy, do you know where this shook out on the comp plan and on the Lake Compesca? I think I know the answer, but I'll let you answer that.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So when we adopted the Lake Commercial District, we did include this area within the boundary map. And then we were working on the comprehensive land use update at that time too. So they did touch on, they referenced the Lake Commercial District and said that this would be an appropriate area for commercial when it's redeveloped at Lake Compesca. So it's within that same boundary map that was included, that's included in the ordinance for the Lake Commercial District.
So this was one of the places where they said, I didn't remember that actually. Can you show that on, can you share your screen?
Yes, let me get it pulled up here.
And the comp plan has so many maps, it's really hard to ferret through quickly. I brought it up, but.
Okay, could you guys see that?
Yes.
So you'll see here, this is the area we're looking at, which the purpose, and I'll go up to that, the purpose of the Lake Commercial District was to establish appropriate locations within the boundary map for lake commercial activity that's conducive to the lake. And so that's where the need for storage is out there. So that's the need that the applicants are trying to fill, I believe.
Okay, so you're saying that every place at the lake, every single property is appropriate for commercial lake zoning? Because every property at the lake is covered by that map.
Right. Well, it's one that is it's applicable to come forward for a rezone. Areas that are outside of the boundary map can't ask for the rezone at all. But we're just saying, because of the proximity to the lake, that if there wasn't a need for commercial development that somebody wanted to propose, that they could ask it within this boundary map.
How about in the Lake Compesca master plan, there were sites around the lake that were found to be appropriate for commercial. Right. That was controversial.
And on there, it's actually, on both of the zoning maps, there's inconsistencies. So what they showed the current zoning, which is the R1. So on one map, they're showing the R1 single family as being there, and then on the other one, they're showing the PUD, planned unit development, that's actually there today. So, but they didn't really touch on redevelopment. And they didn't touch on the Lake Commercial District really either, other than that we needed to create one.
So can you bring that one up? I found it. It's on page. I can't share mine. It's page 36.
Okay, sounds good.
And it's all dark green, which is park campground. City, regional, or state parks and campgrounds. available for public use. That's what they're recommending. Future land use. Oh no, it's yellow. Part of it is yellow, lake residential.
Page 13, you said? Okay. Okay, let me get the table of contents maybe.
I found it on page 36.
Okay. I thought you said 13 at
There.
first, sorry. Was
There you go.
confused.
Zoom way in on that, yeah.
So that's the area there for the, and then that is showing that single family for the land use categories is lake residential. And the map on the right displays the future land uses desired for that area from the.
So.
And then what the zoning recommendations here though is that we create the new lake residential zoning and then the lake commercial district. So then that's where, after this was approved, and that's when our lake commercial district came into effect, that this plan wasn't able to fully utilize.
Right, but the question was asked, how is this different from the campground on the north side of the lake, north of the lodge? How is it different from that? Well, that's actually shown on the future land use map as pink, whatever pink stands.
Highway commercial.
Highway commercial. So that's one difference. And so is the little area by Highway 20 also shown as, so if you're looking at our zoning recommendations that the council has acted upon in the past, this was very controversial. Getting this map adopted. And so this is not one of the areas that was recommended. Not that it couldn't be, because as Brandy showed, any property at the lake could be considered for commercial lake zone.
Yeah, and Mayor, if I may, I think that's, just to reiterate or reinforce what Brandy was explaining there, that blue map that she showed with the boundary, that showed the eligible property that could be zoned to CL. And in those discussions that happened subsequent to the Lake Compesca Master Plan, you're exactly right. There's a lot of land around the lake, obviously, and a lot of it is residential. And when we created that CL zoning district recently, that discussion, part of that discussion was, the vision that some of these areas could be rezoned to CL. You would have redevelopment of currently zoned and developed property. Any one of these residential lots, for example, could sell off to a commercial developer, and then they would use the CL zoning district to exercise what we created through that CL zoning opportunity. And I think that, of course, it's important we look at the Lake Compesca Master Plan, and then also, like Brandy pointed out, keeping in mind what the logic was when we created the CL district, and using it as a tool for redevelopment of some of these areas. I don't know if this map would have looked differently in the Compesca Master Plan had we had the CL district finalized at the time of this master plan. That's kind of what I'm getting at. We maybe would have, the consultants maybe would have recommended more of that redevelopment around this, around the lake, knowing the exact details of our CL zoning district that we adopted. But that's a hypothetical on my part.
True.
So.
All right, anyone else
Mayor,
want to weigh in? Councilman Vilhauer?
Maybe this isn't particularly germane to the zoning issue, but I want to touch on something that Mr. Foley referred to about 54th Street being a section line, and that road going through up to 212. Heath, you're kind of our traffic control person, aren't you, or traffic flow person in the community? Did you have any comments about that relative to this conversation?
In regards to anything specific, Councilman Vilhauer, or just in general?
Just in general, does it make sense from a zoning standpoint? I mean, does that make this a more opportunistic area for traffic flow purposes if we were to have some commercial development out there? Or is it really not pertinent to the conversation tonight?
Yeah, I think that, there's some validity with the transportation network and your connectivity for any commercial zoning district in relation to that transportation network. So the point that Mr. Foley made, I think is a valid one. It's an accurate one, that you do have connectivity through to the south, and potentially that could spur more use, customers driven to access this commercial property. And there's a lot of other factors, of course, that come into play. The fact that it's a gravel road might hinder some of that additional traffic. Maybe, maybe not. But it is a valid point to be made and a consideration when zoning is what your transportation network looks like.
Oh, I think that is a really important point, Glenn, and I think that's the strongest point that they have going for them, is that this is shown on our major street plan as a future minor collector route. Even though it's a gravel road today, that's because it isn't developed. Someday it probably will be developed, and the gravel road gets paved as people develop. That's how it's been going on in the past. But it does show on our major street plan, which is part of our comprehensive plan, as a major route. It's one of the few that goes to Lake Kempesca from 212. And so that is a very good point. But it's also, if you take a tub and it doesn't have an outlet and you fill it partially, where does the extra water go? And I know this is not the question for the zoning, but it's something to consider, because the road is probably the first place where that water will go. Is that gravel road is probably the lowest, other than this low land in the golf course itself. Any extra flooding that will be caused by filling the available flood capacity flows onto the adjacent lowest land, which is the golf course and the gravel road. So the road could be raised. Golf course maybe not so much. That's dollars and cents, but it's all part of the very difficult decision that you have to make, because there's always a rub. Is it development or is it protection? And Lake Kempesca, it's a lot harder to keep it clean than it is to clean it up after it gets dirty. And the low-lying areas around the lake do serve a function. All the dirty water flows into them and soaks into the groundwater and refeeds into the lake that way. And if this area is totally filled to the point where it's not low anymore, that water flows dirty somewhere else. It isn't soaking into the ground here. And this is the age-old argument for not filling wetlands, because wetlands do clean the water up. We know they do a very good job at that. That's science. And so it's a trade-off, right? Is it progress to move forward and develop, or should we be more concerned about protecting water quality and therefore fisheries? So does anybody else want to weigh in on this? No hands are up. You guys ready to vote? Yeah, I'm going to call for a vote. The motion is to approve the rezone. So all those in favor signify by saying aye, and those opposed signify by saying nay. Roll call vote, please, Kristen.
Phil Hauer?
Thanks a lot, Kristen. Aye.
Rademski?
Aye.
Manti?
Nay.
Lallam?
Aye.
Pauline?
Aye.
Bueller?
Aye.
Albertson?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. item C is the 2021 budget appropriation. So number one is the ordinance number 20-31 for the 2021 budget appropriation, second reading and council action. And I'll look for a motion, and then have a motion by Bueller and a second by Holeen. And I'll ask the finance officer, Kristen Bobzien, to tell us about this.
Thank you, Mayor. Before the council is the second reading of the 2021 budget appropriation ordinance. I did go over some of the slight changes from the budget hearing to the first reading. Nothing else has changed from the first reading. This is exactly what you saw. What this will do after this is passed, this will pretty much set the 2021 budget, and then I will also certify the property tax number to the county auditor. So if there's any questions, I can answer them. Otherwise, that's it.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Question or a comment from Councilman Vilhar?
Just a comment. I mean, we're looking at a sizable deficit that we're budgeting in our general fund for 2021, and I guess we're making no bones about it that we're looking at CARES Act funding to help shore up that shortfall, something that we can't rely upon on an ongoing basis. So I just want to make that comment that if these numbers continue, we got a serious problem after next year.
Agree. Anyone else? All right, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Roll call vote, please.
Vilhar,
Aye.
Roby,
Aye.
Rademski,
Aye.
Manti,
Aye.
Lalum,
Aye.
Helene,
Aye.
Bueller,
Aye.
Albertson.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, and item 2 is the approval of the 2021 enterprise funds budget appropriation. And did you want to add anything to that, Kristen?
No, this is exactly what was at the first reading. It's just this doesn't require the ordinance, so we kind of do it separate, but it will be published in the paper and set the 2021 budget for the enterprise funds.
All right, we'll get another motion for that. Motion by Holeen and a second by Rademski. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye, and those opposed signify by saying nay. Roll call vote, please, Kristen.
Vilhar,
Aye.
Roby,
Aye.
Rademski,
Aye.
Manti,
Aye.
Lalum,
Aye.
Helene,
Aye.
Bueller,
Aye.
Albertson.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
All right, item D is the first reading of ordinance number 20-36, a zoning text amendment to chapter 21.28, C3 Highway Commercial District of the revised ordinances of the City of Watertown. And there's no action here, but I'll ask Public Works Director Heath Von Eye to tell us about it.
Just a point of clarity, Mayor, did we strike D or?
Oh, I think we did. Yeah, I forgot. Did we?
Or is that still on? That reassessment?
Did I skip one?
Yeah, I think you skipped one, Mayor.
Which one did I skip?
That's item D for the reassessment for the 26th Street improvements.
That's item E. I'm on D.
Oh, apparently there's different
the
versions
published
of the
agenda.
agenda.
It's item D.
Oh, I have the older version. Sorry. Wow.
No, my apologies. We can take them in either order. I didn't want to skip that one if
Okay.
it was still on the agenda.
Didn't know it was different. Okay, I have an old version. I just did the first reading. There's no action. Why don't we just finish that one up?
Absolutely. Yes, so the this is a zoning text amendment to Chapter 21 related to the C3 Highway Commercial District. Essentially what we're trying to accomplish here through the staff's drafting of this and the subsequent Planning Commission's recommendation for approval is that we would be allowing for contractor shops by conditional use, which is currently part of the C3 district, but to go further and allow for caretakers' residence in those contractor shops. So, again, contractor shops allowed by conditional use in a C3. This amendment allows caretaker residents to be in those contractor shops. So that was recommended for approval by the Planning Commission on September 10th at their last Planning Commission meeting. Any questions? We'd be glad to help answer them.
All right, anybody have any questions?
I do, Mayor.
Okay, Councilman
Heath,
Bueller?
can you kind of explain to me what they mean by that? Caretaker, what?
Yes, absolutely. The zoning ordinance definitions do explicitly call out what a caretaker is, and it's a either an owner occupancy of that shop or an employee, an active working employee of the business that owns that shop that is considered a caretaker. And I'm paraphrasing off memory here, but Brandy, if you could chime in if there's anything further to that definition that's notable.
Yeah, that was a good paraphrase. If you guys, I can read it out of ordinance, but I mean that is, so it's a single family dwelling unit which will be considered an accessory use to the primary business. The individual residing at this residence must own or be employed by the business. No home occupations will be allowed. And the big reasoning for adding this to the C3 Highway Commercial District is because currently we only allow it by conditional use in the I-1 Light Industrial District, but we also allow for contractor shops, which is typically where we see this type of use be asked for. So we allow that in the C3 district, but we don't allow caretakers residence as even an option to be applied for. So what we saw in the past is that people were asking for an apartment, which isn't appropriate necessarily in certain areas within the C3 district. So just trying to allow for them to apply for a conditional use as if they were in the I-1 district.
Thank you.
Right, any other questions or comments? All right, we'll move on, and I'm a little bit confused. I've got the new agenda up, and it's my item E, but it would be item D. Approval of Resolution 20-41, levying increased assessments for street project 1801D. Look for a motion. Motion by Rademski. A second by Bueller, and Matt, I'll let you start this one. If you'll kick this one off for us, please, before I open the public hearing.
Sure, thanks, Mayor. Street Improvement Project 1801D was located just southwest of Walmart on 26th Street Southeast. There's a illustration on the agenda, attached to the agenda. It was constructed as an assessment project in 2018 at the request of adjacent property owners. You might recall that this was kind of a unique one where we had to set aside and then reassess a portion of the assessment in 2019 to allow one of the property owners to subdivide the previously assessed lot. You could also recall that we had a discussion about the city sharing in some costs of the increased cost that came in higher than expected due to asphalt. And in the midst of all that, we had a change over of some staffing. So anyway, here we are today after the final change order and the sorting out of the attributable costs. The final apportionment of costs has been calculated and is reflected in these additional assessments that you have in front of you. And so essentially right now, the numbers that you see in front of you will be added on to the assessments that have already been levied to account for the increased costs resulting from the final change order for the project.
All right, thank you. And I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. And if anyone is here to speak about this item, please come forward. Or if you're online, say permission to speak. Hearing no one, I will close the public hearing and entertain discussion. Anybody have any questions? All right. Oh,
Mayor?
Councilman Billhauer?
Have the parties that will be assessed this, have they been kept in the loop on this? Are they aware this is coming?
I believe they have. Is that true, Matt?
Yes, yep. We've had discussions with them some time ago when the additional costs came in, and then they did receive a certified letter in the last couple of weeks regarding this hearing and the additional costs that were going to be assessed.
Okay, thanks, Matt.
Yes.
All right, any other comments or questions? Okay, then we'll have some action. All those in favor signify by saying aye, and those opposed signify by saying nay. Roll call vote, please, Kristen.
Billhauer,
Aye.
Roby,
Aye.
Rademski,
Aye.
Manti,
Aye.
Lalum,
Aye.
Helene,
Aye.
Bueller,
Aye.
Albertson.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item F is adoption of resolution of intent to enter into a lease agreement with Watertown Motor Company, LLC, for city-owned real property located at the Watertown Regional Airport. A motion by Helene and a second by Rademski. And Matt, I'll ask you to tell us about this one, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Watertown Motor Company LLC seeks to lease 5,625 square feet of land at the airport to construct their 75 by 75 foot private hangar at the current rate of 16 cents per square foot, which would come out to $900 a year initially with a 2% inflationary clause. Just as a refresher of what we're doing here, statute requires us to, when the city leases land to private parties, we have to do this resolution of intent to enter into a lease. And the resolution of intent also sets the public hearing. So this resolution sets the public hearing for the next council meeting, at which time the council will consider the actual lease.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments, Council? Councilman Bueller?
No, thanks, Mayor. What is the intention? What is the use? What do they plan to do with this?
So this is a ground lease similar to many ground leases we've approved in the last couple of years. I shouldn't say many, I guess 4 or 5, but essentially it's going to be owned by this LLC, but it's Scott Driscoll. I believe he's the entity has purchased a plane, and they're going to be storing their private plane there.
Okay, thanks.
Matt, is there anything that requires someone to utilize a hangar for a plane? I mean, could somebody rent that, lease the land, and build a storage facility for other things?
No, the lease does require them to construct a hangar. I suppose in theory a hangar could double as a garage of some sort, but typically I don't think that's been an issue. But typically, I mean there is incidental storage, I suppose, that occurs there, but all of them so far have been storing their private planes there. So
Yeah, well, I know it's in big demand. Any other questions or comments? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye, and those opposed signify by saying nay. Roll call vote, please, Kristen.
Billhauer,
Aye.
Roby,
Aye.
Rademski,
Aye.
Manti,
Aye.
Lalum,
Aye.
Helene,
Aye.
Bueller,
Aye.
Albertson.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item G is council consideration of a request for public sanitary sewer service connection for property outside of city limits for Mr. Stacy Whitnable, 1202 41st Street Southeast, Cottington County. So I'll need a motion. A motion by Billhauer. Second by Holeen. And Heath, you want to introduce this, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We don't see very many of these. As far as requests for sanitary sewer service connections outside the city limits. Once in a while, they come up, and wastewater superintendent Mike Berger shares the costs, and people kind of turn the other direction because of it becomes a little bit cost prohibitive for most folks in most situations. This one, however, the applicant or the county resident did want to pursue approval from the council. The reason it's coming forward to council is as part of our adopted policy that we've had in place since 2002 and was amended in 2005 that gives an option to add outside city limit services to our public city sanitary sewer. This property is out on the southeast side of town, and if I will note that the policy states that exceptions to the outside city limits may be granted by the city council on a case-by-case basis. It does state the sanitary sewer service will generally or normally not be provided to those outside the city limits. We currently, at least to our knowledge, have only one county resident that is connected to our city sanitary sewer system. And in laying that groundwork, the policy also does have options on how to exercise a connection. There's criteria that would have to be followed, including the typical tap fee and hookup fees. This particular sewer main they'd be tying into has a frontage assessment that would be charged to the property owner. And then another stipulation in our policy is that an annual fee in lieu of property taxes be assessed to those outside the city limits. Theory being that since they're not annexed and we are not recouping any property taxes from them, that we assess an annual fee that would be approximate to the taxes we would have otherwise collected from them had they been in the city. This particular example equates to about a $540 annual fee for that fee in lieu of property taxes. The aforementioned hookup fee totals $1,029. That includes an $800 frontage assessment for the sewer main that exists, and a tapping fee of $230 roughly. All that being said, wastewater staff, I believe Mike and Craig are both here tonight. They can speak to in more detail to the inspection that was made, but they did make an inspection on the property. There is concern over the high groundwater conditions at this location, and the potential to have an ongoing inflow from sump pump sources from this property or any of the properties adjacent to it for that matter. There was a presence of sumps being pumped, and then in the history of that sump pump activity at this property, it seems to be pretty predominantly existent due to the high groundwater conditions at this location. So staff recommends denying the request for the sewer connection outside city limits. Just as the policy states, it will not normally be provided, and because the property is a potential source of clear water entering into the public sewer system, if not monitored and inspected routinely, which obviously creates a workload burden on the city staff to routinely have to monitor and inspect that location. I do have a map I'll pull up here, and I'll invite Mike and Craig to the table if they have any other comments. Otherwise, we could stand by for any questions you might have. And I'll share my screen with this map of the location here as soon as I get pulled up. GIS is a little slow at loading here. I apologize. Mike, did you have anything you wanted to add to that discussion?
No, I think you've covered it in detail. Yeah, I think you've covered everything.
Is the fee the same as it would be for a person inside the city limits?
Well, the fee there's three components to the fee structure if this were to be approved. And one is whatever the monthly sewer charge is, you'd pay that, like we all do. And as Heath mentioned, there's a hookup fee, which had the assessment and tapping fee. And then the fee in lieu of taxes, that's calculated, and the finance department bills that on an annual basis. And that's subject to change with the valuation of the property and the tax levy. And I guess I would just add then, as Heath indicated, that the wastewater staff did inspect this residence on August 17th of this year, and the staff was informed that the sump pump ran through winter into spring, but that the sump pump was not pumping into the septic tank at that time. And the resident had told staff that they're currently pumping their drain field out of their septic tank to the surface to prevent the septic tank from backing up. So I guess there's some sort of a groundwater issue going up there, and I guess, as Heath mentioned, there are a couple other residences directly to the north of this property as well. So I guess we do see that over time, it's something that has to be monitored to ensure that it didn't affect our sanitary sewer system. As you're aware, we spend a significant amount of our resources identifying and eliminating clear water discharging to the sewer. So we are concerned about the water issues up here in this area.
All right. Where is the other one that we have? You said
There's 4th Avenue.
Okay. And then Kristen could probably answer this. Do you get involved in the annual billing, or is
No,
that something finance does? You're aware of that one, Kristen?
Yes, we actually reach out to the county to verify, and then we'll calculate that fee.
And what is the criteria for allowing a connection such as this outside the city limits? Is there some?
There is no criteria. The policy states that it will normally not be provided, but that the council on a case-by-case basis could make an exception to that policy.
Yep.
I think, so there's no listed criteria.
Do you know what the reason was for the other one?
I believe that there was some drainage through the property where they thought that a septic tank wouldn't work on that property.
Okay, so there we have it. And there's several other houses in that same
Yeah,
vicinity?
right where the cursor is there. Mr. Whitnable is with us here tonight, but there's 3 houses where the cursor is. About where that green circle is, the manhole, the southern property is the one that's before us tonight for consideration. And then there are 2 more that are contiguous, one to this property and then one north of that. There's 3 of them in there. And then there's another one up further north on the other side of the street as well. But yeah, the southern one there where that manhole was at would be the property in question.
All right. Let's see here. Bring my screen back. Council, do you have any questions?
I'm also turning on the city limits layer, Madam Mayor, just for context too. These yellow indicates the city limits that currently exist. So in some of these cases, had they been contiguous to the city limits, I could see making a recommendation for approval, but requiring them to annex being appropriate. Of course, these residences are far enough out that really isn't an option in this particular case.
How old is this sewer?
Oh, the public sewer?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. It existed prior to my being here. I've been
Okay.
here for 25 and a half years, I guess, not quite 26.
How long's WAPA been there?
Don't know that either. Sorry.
So they might be about the same age, I wonder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Councilman Roby had his hand up. Did you still have a question, Councilman?
Well, thank you. Heath kind of answered it. My question was, this is obviously very rare. It's the first one I've ever seen. And will we only do this when it's contiguous, or is there a reason to entertain this when it's not contiguous?
I think, I guess contiguous or not contiguous to city limits. It is flagpole, so they won't probably be annexed for many years to come. But I guess I couldn't tell you. This is the second case. The last one was, 15, 18 years ago.
And I think, Councilman Roby, I understand where your question is coming from. Is there any benefit to the sewer system or to the sewer operations, either from a revenue side or, in particular instances where you have infrastructure in place that's maybe not fully utilized or things of that nature? I would say in this particular case, there aren't any concerns operationally about the way it's currently set up and who it currently feeds. I think that it became more problematic to allow this one just based on the high groundwater conditions and the need to have to continually observe and monitor the flows going into the sewer main from this location. And again, I would reiterate, if this were right up immediately adjacent to Highway 212, I think we would potentially look at it differently, at least from a staffing recommendation, where you could require an annexation in order to obtain the connection. I've seen that exercised before as well, and works well that way.
Yeah, I believe the one case that we're aware of did sign a waiver of right to protest annexation, and as part of the hookup.
Right, you would expect that sort of thing. So on the one side, obviously we built this sewer, there's what we call an assessment on it, cost recovery set up for future connections, but the taxpayers paid for this sewer, it's in place, it exists, and it presumably has the capacity to support this. Are you concerned at all about that, Mike?
No, not about the capacity of the sanitary sewage that would be generated by the properties. It's an 8-inch line. I don't have any concern about that. My concern is the potential for it to be a source of clear waters at some point getting into our system, which is a battle we fight all year long.
Right, and we have ordinances in place to address that, even though we do struggle with it. I guess I would kind of like to ask a question of the property owner, if you wouldn't mind. If you'd state your name for the record, please.
Stacy Whitnable.
Thank you.
You bet.
How does the land drain? What's the fall?
So it's pretty flat where I'm at. I'm actually up on a hill more, but the ground is flat and it consists more of a clay base in the bottom. Not like sand or gravel where it sifts through. So that's where the groundwater retains, so to speak.
How long has your house been there?
There was a trailer house there in the 60s, and then my place has been there since 2005.
Has this been an ongoing problem or just something
Only
recent?
in the last 2-3 years with the high water content, things like that. Yep. Prior to me, I've been in this house for 11 years. I haven't had this problem since 2 or 3 years ago. So, and it's more or less a thing where it's a hassle. Got to pump it out 2-3 times a day. You just pump it out on the lawn. I got nice grass, but it's just not very feasible. So, but yeah, the water does flow towards 212. It kind of goes downhill from there into that ditch kind of along Highway 212 where the reeded areas there and stuff. But that's kind of I assume the general water flow of drainage, I guess, but.
And then you do have a sump that runs part of the year, but not all of the year? normally?
Well, like right now it's not running. Hasn't for probably a couple months. In the winter, last winter it did run. But I do have a underground pipe that puts it right out into the road ditch. So there is no anything on my lawn that way or any kind of water problem that way, I guess. So.
And that worked even in the winter?
Hit or miss.
What do you do when it's freezing?
We just got to put a hose out and then freezes outside too. So it's kind of it's a hassle, put it that way. Can't leave our house too much in the winter the last 2 years without somebody checking on it and things of that nature. So, but.
All right. Council members, do you have any questions?
Madam Mayor, if I may. Just based on the conversation, if the council were to entertain this, I think if we were to put some appropriate restrictions on as far as maybe prohibiting any sump collection system from being connected to their sanitary sewer service, and of course the aforementioned waiver of right to protest any future annexations, if the council were to entertain it.
Anyone else have a question or comment?
Who made the motion, Mayor?
Let's see. I think you did. I have you and Reed as a second.
I would amend the motion to incorporate what Heath just said.
Include waiver of right to protest and prohibition from connecting the sump?
Any sump, yeah, prohibit any sump collection systems from being connected to the sanitary sewer service.
So no chance for a variance?
Yes. I'll let Mike speak to that if he deems that appropriate. If the council were to entertain approval, Mike, I figured that'd be one way to help mitigate some of the concerns for a connection of that sump flow by prohibiting it.
Yes, we would not want to have a variance out there, and it was still something you'd have to watch over the years because things do change.
Yeah. Councilman Holeen, are you okay with that? You seconded it? Okay. We have amended motion. Any other discussion? Okay, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye, and those opposed signify by saying nay. Roll call vote, please, Kristen.
Bill Howard,
Aye.
Roby,
Aye.
Rademski,
Aye.
Manti,
Aye.
Lalum,
Aye.
Colleen,
Aye.
Bueller,
Aye.
Albertson.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item H is approval of 2021 open enrollment agreements for employees and authorization for the Human Resources Director to sign all necessary documents. And I think we can do these all at once. Is that correct? And we have our Human Resource Director, Jelaine Pifley, online to talk about this. And Jelaine, do you want to take it all as one motion?
Yes, please, Mayor.
Yes, okay.
So essentially, there is no change to Delta Dental, to MetLife, to WageWorks, or to VSP. We do have a 3.09% increase to our health insurance, but no changes in regards to the coverage.
Okay. I don't have a motion yet, so.
I make the motion.
I have a motion by Rademski and a second, was that Lalum?
Yes.
Okay, second by Lalum. And what kind of discussion do we have here? Adam, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask Shalene, is that, what's that increase compared to what it was last year?
I think it's around the same, actually, around that 3%.
I would assume that's kind of what we were expecting anyway.
Actually, we were expecting a 13%, so we got very lucky.
We were lucky.
Yeah, that's even better.
Yeah.
Yep.
We're trying not to jump up and down too much. And Councilman Vilhar?
That sounds great, Jelaine, but how do we get lucky to go from 13% down to where it is? I mean, any explanation for that?
So essentially, the projection came to us from Marsh McLennan. They were projecting a 13% increase specifically with COVID and just kind of some of the changes that they're seeing. However, they did work with Wellmark Blue Cross Blue Shield, and it wasn't a guaranteed 13%, again, just a projection. But when they visited with them, they were able to get it to 3%.
Okay, because I know the county's looking at a 9-10% increase, something like that for next year. So this is a very pleasant surprise, in my opinion.
Yes, I agree.
So people on teams are still looking at the sewer map, but we're gonna see if we can.
I was just gonna bring that up.
There we go. Okay, there we are. So do we have any questions or comments from the council? Give the online folks a second to look at that.
I think it's great the way it ended up coming out.
Yes.
Yes, I was very pleased.
Okay, if there aren't any questions, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye, and those opposed signify by saying nay. Roll call vote, please, Kristen.
Bill Howard,
Aye.
Roby,
Aye.
Rademski,
Aye.
Manti,
Aye.
Lalum,
Aye.
Colleen,
Aye.
Bueller,
Aye.
Albertson.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Right, thank you. Item I is review of the continued necessity of resolution number 20-15 declaring an emergency concerning the pandemic outbreak of the novel coronavirus, COVID-19, and providing for responsive measures related to the operations of the city and the protection of public health. And Matt has talked about this every time. I don't know that there's nothing proposed to be changed at this time, but we look at this every council meeting in case you want to change something. So, Councilman Vilhauer?
I've got a question. You and I discussed this briefly last week, and I know the school board, I believe, actually took action last week as far as designating critical employees that prevents us from all of a sudden having critical employees, in our opinion, that have been potentially exposed, that are now forced to quarantine or isolate. Do you want to talk? You know what I'm referring to,
Yes,
Sarah?
sure. So let's just take the airport, for instance. We only have 6 people that work out there. And if one of them were sick and 3 more were exposed to that person and had all of them quarantined for 2 weeks, we'd be really hard pressed to keep the airport open with only a couple employees. So this is the reason that some places will declare certain employees as essential or critical, or Matt, tell me the word. Okay. You used a different word. I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah, you're correct. I mean, there's critical infrastructure workers, I believe, is what the federal government term was, which more or less means quote unquote essential. The email, are you referring to the email I sent earlier today?
Yes.
So the kind of frontier here is, you know, if you declare folks essential, what does that mean for their eligibility for the COVID leave that was put together and passed by Congress in March? And from best I can tell, essentially what the Department of Labor, Federal Department of Labor has said is that the definition of emergency responder has been broadly interpreted to essentially mean all essential workers. And so I think what the city would do if they chose would be to declare all of the city employees or some as emergency responders under the FFCRA, which would no longer entitle our staff to the benefits of that program, but the council could entertain a kind of hybrid program that still allowed for some leave, and it would also take into account that certain positions in our city can fully function remotely if necessary. So that's kind of where that's at, I guess.
So the necessity of the council taking action, that's, I think that's kind of what Glenn's referring to, is do the council members need to approve a change to this resolution in order for the employees to be considered essential?
I think the case can be made that the authority is given to you by the resolution, but I think if that type of action were to be taken, I think it'd be more appropriate coming from the council as a whole.
And so what would be the drawbacks of doing that right now, even though we don't have a situation, it's not, but just to do it proactively, what would be the negative side of doing that?
Well, I would maybe ask the HR director, Fleifley, to chime in a little bit, but I think right now, as we've been operating, we've been relying on the FFCRA language. When somebody has close contact, we say, okay, well, you're entitled to 2 weeks of additional leave according to this language. So if we all of a sudden disqualified everybody in the city from qualifying for that leave, then it would throw our current processes for a loop. And so I would caution that we wouldn't want to do that until we have it fully thought out what the replacement policy for the city of Watertown is going to be. If we just did that right now, we would have to come up with a new plan on the fly, and I don't think that would be prudent.
Yeah, I would have to agree, Mayor. I think that we do qualify as essential workers. However, I would like a more detailed policy in place in order for us to kind of lay out what we're going to do moving forward, because what we've been doing is just essentially following the DOH recommendations.
Okay. So, I mean, I haven't written any language in there that, I mean, it is something that the council could do. If that's something that you'd like to do, we can get that drafted for the next meeting.
I brought it up. I'm not suggesting that we try to do it tonight, but I think it is something that we should keep in mind and be ready to review next meeting. We can always decide at that point if we want to adopt it or not, but I'd like to keep our options open and be ready for it if need be.
Yeah, and I think that the language for the resolution is the easy part. The replacement policy of what we're doing, that's what we've agonized over, is how to write that and be fair and, be appropriate. It's just hard to know. Councilman Lallam?
Thank you, Mayor. Do you want to just touch base on Unified Command discussion from today as well, as part of this conversation?
Right, you mean about the numbers going up, and the reason I'm wearing a mask today, the numbers of COVID cases are going up to the point where the medical facilities are scrambling. We aren't at a point where we're testing our hospital capacity or anything like that, but they are very, very busy already. And it doesn't look like the numbers are going to suddenly drop. They seem to be on a trend upward. We are the hot spot, actually, in the state, and our state is a hot spot in the nation. So you can figure that out, what that means. And nobody's wearing a mask, and that's I don't want to say nobody, but people aren't wearing masks out in public, and there's a discomfort and feeling like you're the only one wearing a mask. So the unified commanders had decided, what should we do? We talked about doing a mask mandate, and there wasn't a whole lot of interest in doing that. We want people to wear masks because we do believe that there quite possibly is a benefit to wearing a mask. And now there's some question about, aerosols, and it floats all around the room. If you can contain it, if I'm COVID positive right now, but I don't know it, I could be spreading it to everybody in the room. That's why I'm wearing a mask. So I don't have to call you tomorrow and say, hey, I just fell sick. I was with you for 3 hours last night. You better watch yourself. I can at least say I was wearing a mask. So that is what we can do. There's not a lot we can do. Wearing a mask is something simple that we can do. It's not hard to do. We don't have to debate whether it works or not. We can just go, well, it doesn't hurt, so why don't we try it? And aside from that, a mask mandate is what other communities have chosen, and we didn't think the outcome would be fantastic about that. Is that what you were getting at, Adam?
Yeah, as well as why we were talking about, attempting or having people be essential workers and things of that nature. We wanted to make sure that they're realizing why we're looking at that possible step for the next meeting going forward. In case the numbers continue to increase like they are. I mean, I know the high school and middle school, I believe, has gone all virtual this next week. So the numbers are increasing there. As someone with kids in middle school and intermediate school, I've seen a few texts come through as well. So I think it's something that we just have to be aware of and make sure that we are doing our due diligence for the members of our community.
Right, and I think this is why so many of the council members have chosen to participate electronically. We can, and so they are, and that will help spread the disease. We do feel like people are going to get the disease, but if everybody gets it at the same time, then that puts us in a predicament for keeping our services going, and we want to keep our doors open. We don't want to have to close. So that's the whole reason. So, Councilman Albertson, did you want to say something?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I just was wanting to get back to Jolene. Did that answer your question, or does putting that off make a difference to you? Or are you okay with the conversation of tonight now?
Actually, Councilman Albertson, I would prefer to have a better policy in place. In order for us to move forward, I would like to have something a little bit more firm in writing so we can know how we want to proceed forward, especially if we're going to be changing the leave.
Are you saying tonight, or are you okay to wait for the 2 weeks?
I'd prefer to wait.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
Councilwoman Manti?
Yeah, I was just thinking about what you were saying with the numbers of the clinics and scrambling and things like that. So as a council, as a public, as people here, what can we do to kind of alleviate that a little bit? Is there action that can be taken as far as testing supplies? Should we be asking for more from our state or whatever? I guess I'm sitting here feeling like, is there something we can do to be proactive, as we were talking about with employees, but to be proactive in terms of being able to keep the rapid testing going, keep businesses open, prevent people from having to quarantine unnecessarily for 2 weeks? I think that's some of the problems that people are working against, is that they have no idea whether or not they have to be home for 2 weeks, or do they have to do an expensive sanitization of their workplace, things like that. So I guess I'm thinking out loud and wondering if the command team has addressed any of those issues or thought of them.
And I can say the command team has been, the medical folks have been requesting increased testing supplies from day one, and they've never felt comfortable with our supply, but we get what we get, and they're doing the best they can with it. They've moved back to a more strict decision-making triage, I guess, on how to decide who gets testing now, like they were doing at first when we only had a handful of tests. And we're kind of back in that same position again, where the medical and first responders can get a test, but it's a harder thing for other people to get a test until we have more comfortable levels of supply. So
I guess that was the point I was speaking to, is that without adequate supplies, we're going through some of these unnecessary processes of, well, you've been exposed, so you need to be home for 2 weeks, whether or not you're sick, and so I guess, getting more testing supplies. I don't know, can we steal some from Florida or New York or something? I'm just kidding. But I'd like to be able to feel that we're being proactive about helping them get that.
Right, and I appreciate that. I'm sure that everyone on the command team appreciates it too. I think they're doing what they can, and it doesn't hurt to request from our lawmakers that we have more access to better testing supplies. I mean, it wouldn't hurt to ask. So, anyone else? All right, we will be going into executive session tonight in order to discuss with our legal counsel on contractual matters and personnel matters. And let's see, possibly we have. Yes, and we do expect to take some action when we come out. So I'll look for a motion to go into executive session. A motion by Radomski and a second by Holeen. Any discussion? right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We need a roll call vote, sorry. Kristen?
Billhauer,
Aye.
Roby,
Aye.
Rademski,
Aye.
Manti,
Aye.
Lalum,
All right.
Colleen,
Aye.
Bueller,
Aye.
Albertson.
All right.
Motion carries. Thank you.
All right. So let's see. All right, I gotta log back in here. Okay. So the next item on the agenda is A, starting salary for golf course mechanic position. And let's see what the motion was. To start at grade 3, step 5, with an annual salary of $37,538.25. A motion by Vilhauer and a second by Bueller. And this is a hard-to-fill position, and it's been open for a long time and normally would not go above step 3. We can't go above step 3 without council authorization, so that's why we're doing this, and hopefully we'll be able to attract a candidate with this. So, anybody have any questions or comments? All right, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Roll call vote, please, Kristen.
Vilhauer,
Aye.
Roby,
Aye.
Rademski,
Aye.
Manti,
Aye.
Lalum,
Aye.
Pauline,
Aye.
Bueller,
Aye.
Albertson.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is old business, and I'll start out just by saying we have a sidewalk reimbursement program that I am going to bring forward for looking at the amount that the city contributes toward reimbursement. It's something that we haven't updated since about 2005, and we have some sidewalks that we'll be ordering in here in the future. We want to make sure we're being fair about that. When sidewalks are filling in neighborhoods that have some hit and miss, and they're older neighborhoods, not where there's a development agreement requirement or a building permit requirement for someone to put a sidewalk in, but just where it hasn't been. We do contribute toward that as a community. Every year we do. Also, we help people pay for repairing their sidewalks. And the amount we reimburse right now is $2 a square foot. And we're going to take a look at that. So that will be on a future agenda. And I just wanted to put that out there. Is there any other old business? Okay. Is there any new business? Any liaison member reports? Any announcements? Councilman Vilhauer.
I'd like the minutes to reflect that we lost a long-time city leader in the passing of Dean Gackstetter recently. He was a member of our very first Watertown Hall of Fame class, and he passed away recently. So I'd like the minutes to reflect that.
All right, thank you. Any other announcements?
Mayor,
Councilman Bueller.
just remind everybody there is a public forum tomorrow night, I should say, on
Thank you.
Facebook and
Yes.
TV for the county commissioner position.
It's all the candidates, I think.
Well, I don't know how many people are.
I think there's a state senator
Okay.
race as well. Okay. Any other announcements? Okay, that's the last thing on the agenda. Since there's no other business, I declare us adjourned. Thank you.